All right, this is Ray Mofield, and we're taping for the Marshall County Library oral history interview. And we have a young man here by the name of Ed Bloomingberg, who was born in western Kentucky. He's lived a good part of his life in Michigan, but he's been back and forth. And we're going to ask him some of the things about life in an earlier era. When were you born?
November the 26th, 1884.
Now, that's just about 98 years ago.
That's exactly will be this November.
Your parents were whom?
George W. Bloomingberg, and my mother was Mary Matilda Peck.
Well, very good. Do you know anything about your ancestry farther back than your parents?
Only in on my mother's side. My father was migrated from Mississippi into southern Illinois into Alexander County about sometime before when he was a very small boy. I wouldn't know the date.
All right. So he was born in Mississippi, I believe you once said. He came up the river to Alexander County, Illinois. There was an epidemic there, and he moved to West Kentucky, and he married a Peck.
Yeah, yes, that's right. He did after so long a time. He was, that's right.
Well, I'd like to ask you, what part of the county were you born in?
In the north middle, like, near Scale, Kentucky.
Near Scale, all right. And you went to school where?
Oak Valley.
Do you remember any of your teachers that
I
you had?
I remember a number of them, but I can't locate them just as in turn as it takes one.
That doesn't matter, just...
I remember Mr. Tommy Griggs. I went a few days to him when I was very small. And Mr. Loon Peck, I went to him. And on down to different ones. Tom Hartsfield, Miss Verda Hoover, and various different teachers. I don't remember how many and how long.
Was Oak Valley a one-room school?
It was a very big school, and it was so big they eventually divided it and made two. One in the district was Scale, and the other still Oak Valley.
I see. And what was school like inside then? Did the children pass up to the front and recite?
Yes, indeed they did. Exactly. They had a rostrum up there, and they generally stood up on the rostrum when they recited spelling and such as elemental arithmetic and so on. But of course, when they went down to use a slate or so on, they used their desks.
All right, what games did you play as a child?
Well, what we knew then as town ball is
sort of a baseball game.
Sort of a forerunner of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And then we played base. We had our base, and we choose up and have different sides. Mm-hmm. And we also played Anthony over the school building. Since there was no building, no fence around it, you go all around whichever direction you felt like you needed.
All right. As a young man, what kind of entertainment did you have in the community? Just play parties, maybe?
Parties, different parties. And
was a play party sort of like a square dance?
Yes, very much like it.
Well, you were married in Marshall County, were you?
I was.
To whom were you married?
Beulah Jones.
And that's
Beulah Alma Jones.
From the Hardin community, more or less?
No, from the Unity.
Unity, a little east of Hardin.
East of Hardin, about 5 miles.
And did you have any children?
We had 5.
5 children, and how did you earn a living after you married?
Well, we were farmers. Till about 26, I decided that I would go to Detroit, and so I've been there since. And in Detroit, I worked for the manufacturing, such as Bud and Hudson, motor cars, and Bud's a supplier, and Hudson was a builder of motor cars.
Did you have much farm machinery then?
Well, I didn't own the common that was dragged by horses. There was no tractor for me. There was few through the community, but them fellas went broke quick.
All right, you familiar then with with a breaking plow and a double shovel and a...
Yes, and also the cultivator, the one-row cultivator I had that pulled with two horses or mules.
All right, you said you went to Michigan about 1926.
That's
Did you
right.
try to work any other place away from Kentucky? Or
No, not especially so. I did when I was younger, worked at sawmills and different things through the slack seed and the farming.
about what kind of pay did you get for working a day then?
Well, in the sawmill work, I worked for what is known as a John Skull. Worked about 5 years, working off $1,100-acre tract of land. It took about 5 years, and he paid $1 a day and board and 11-hour work.
That was a little different to today.
Yes.
While you were farming here, what crops did you grow?
Well, tobacco, corn, and different kinds of hay for feed. And I did grow a little wheat, but you might say that didn't amount to anything, 'cause it didn't grow much.
That is mostly for your own use.
Yeah, it was.
And the tobacco, though, you took to,
Well,
where did you sell it?
At Paducah Market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we might have once in a while sold a crop at the Benton. They'd have somebody buying it, but price in Benton, but most of the time Paducah.
Well, what were the roads like to Paducah then?
Well, we had a gravel road about 7 or 8 miles, or 10 maybe, out of Paducah, and the rest was clay for a while. After a while, we got it all gravel, clear out to Benton and other directions around. Just a plain gravel road, they all gravel and spread it out, packed it down not with machinery, but by running over constantly with wagons and so forth. Eventually packed.
You remember any of the churches in those areas? Was there an Oak Valley church then?
Well, there was an Oak Valley church, yes, for most of my life, but in the beginning it was Bryantsburg. My mother and father were members at Bryantsburg, the Church of Christ. Eventually they organized a church at Oak Valley and used a school building as a church house. And later on they put up a building about 98, I believe.
Well, do you remember any of the preachers?
Oh, yes, Brother Pace and Joe Ratliff. I'll not go to the trouble of calling them brother, I'll just name them. And quite a number of them, and Joe Ratliff, Monroe Pace, David Gillum in particular, and many others that come through. This was, in the beginning, it was about one sermon a month. You understand?
Yes, sir. Were the sermons any longer than they are now?
Yes, considerably, generally. There was another James Ratliff that preached there too, and I don't know. I've a brother Hardeman and Freed from down in Tennessee. We had them preach different times around. And
do you remember what Benton was like back then?
well, at Benton didn't improve any for many years, but not like it is today. There was just a little place all surrounded by farms, and they could not be bought.
Gravel streets.
Yes, that's right, gravel streets.
Do you recall any of the merchants that were in business
yes,
then?
a number of them. J.D. Peterson, Edgar Ferguson, and Stroud Brothers. Dr. Starks was a druggist, and Archie Nelson, and a number of others. Brandon, I can't recall all of them. Barry one time was a druggist, but that was my very early days.
Now, when the first train ran, you were 6 years old. You don't happen to recall that?
I don't recall that particular train because I was on the other side of the river from that, and I wasn't right on the railroad. But when this road built here, I believe it was in '92 when it started, when my father worked in the crew, laying some part of the track or the rails or something, ties probably. Anyway, he helped build the railroad for some little distance.
Do you remember the first train you saw?
Well, no,
Your impressions of it.
well, I don't remember, but the best I can remember right now that they didn't change much from that and the last one, except it got bigger, more powerful.
What about your first car? Were there cars and several cars in the county before you left in 26?
Oh, yes, quite a few, but I didn't own one. Some of my neighbors did, but my first car I bought, I think, was about 33 or 4, and it was a Chrysler, a 6-cylinder, overdrive, and many other things I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What did you? You said you farmed. Did you buy any land, Uncle Ed?
Oh, yes, I bought land, and I bought it by little pieces. I bought 25 acres from Mr. Joe Peck.
About what did land sell for then?
Well, the first I bought was woodland. It's fairly, pretty fair for timber, at $10 an acre. Then the next I bought a little further joining it, sided right with it and cornered with it for $15 an acre. A couple of years probably later, or a little more or less, I'd say.
Could you describe the houses then? Were there still log houses then?
Well, there was a few log houses, but generally the houses were very fair, mostly box, we'd call box houses, or frame. Wood houses, no brick, the mountain thing, if not any in the country.
Heated by a fireplace, probably.
Generally by a fireplace or a heater, stove.
You remember any of the county officials back in those times?
Well, yes, Mr. Pete Ely and the sheriff was Pete Ely was sheriff, and different one. Lewis Wallace was a sheriff for time, and I don't know just how many could they say.
One of our older officials that I remember was Judge Henry Lovett. I don't know whether he was around that early or not.
Yes, he was, Henry Lovett. And as far as judge is concerned, Judge Shalmel, Bob Shalmel, and Mike Oliver, and quite a number of them judges and lawyers.
You remember anything about any of the governors?
Not so much about the governors at the time.
Well, if I figured it right, you weren't quite old enough to vote in the election of 1904.
Well, would I have been?
You'd have been 20 years old, I guess. And you had to be 21 then, didn't you?
Yes, you had to be 21, but there's a certain primary election. If you was going to be 21, I think you could vote before you really got 21. Wasn't that the fact?
Well, it is now, and that may be true.
I think it was at that time.
So you may have voted in the election of 1904.
Well, not very likely I did.
In 1908, William Howard Taft ran. Do you remember him as president?
Very well, a little short, fat fella.
Yes, sir.
Well, if you want to talk about presidents now, let's go back a little bit and talk about Lincoln. Lincoln was elected president before I was born, and he was taken office afterwards for his first term. And then he was off 4 years, and he was elected again. No, that's Cleveland I'm talking about.
Grover Cleveland,
Grover
yes, sir.
Cleveland,
yeah. So you remember something about President Cleveland then?
Yes, I remember the heart depression we had in his last administration. It was very bad, especially to farmers.
Do you remember any other incidents about presidents that were particularly impressive to you?
Well, I remember quite a bit about presidents from that time on. Next time would be, what is his name?
Teddy Roosevelt?
No, Teddy Roosevelt was later. Who was before Teddy? He's from...
McKinley?
McKinley, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
William McKinley in the Spanish-American War.
The blowing up of the battleship Maine?
Yes, I believe that. And then Teddy Roosevelt was more or less put in by accident.
He was vice president when McKinley was killed.
Yeah, you see, New York wanted to get rid of him, and they made the vice president out of him. And the vice president didn't have much to do then. But when McKinley got killed, that backfired on the big politicians.
That's right. That's right. You've got a beautiful memory there. leaving Kentucky for a moment, you said you worked, what, at Bud's in Detroit? Did you?
Yes, the Bud
you-
Manufacturing Company in Detroit.
Now, did you retire there?
Yes, I retired from Bud's, but I worked some at Hudson Motor Car Company, and I also worked with a bridge building company known as the Missouri Valley, and they put in the Dix Avenue Bridge to whoever might understand what I'm talking about. It was a Basque bridge raised up in the middle for the boats across the Rude River right at the end of the south end, would say, of Ford's factory.
And after you retired there, did you work anywhere else?
Well, I worked for the sports service. It's a concession at the Tiger Stadium.
All right. Now, you went to Detroit in 26. Now, that was before there was a bridge across the Ohio River in this part of the world.
That's true.
So how did you get across that big thing?
Oh, we went the river.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're common ferries at that time. They were common just hand or ferries, generally Ohio, Tennessee, Cumberland, and then there are other rivers around there, even Mississippi.
They rode those ferries across.
They rode them by hand, you know. They could do that.
I heard my dad say once there was a ferry that he remembered at Egner's Ferry that it had a mule that walked a treadmill.
Well, they might have, but I didn't know anything about them kind of ferries. But later on, they put these little outboard motors to the side of one of them and pulled them by power. But before that, they would roll these boats way up, you know, and angle them across the river. By the time they got across, they were down to the landing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way those hand ferries worked.
Well, we mentioned Benton a while ago. Do you remember anything about Hardin in the early days?
Well, not so much, but it was, I've been around Hardin different times from, say, when maybe 16, 18, passed through, drove around.
There was a store at scale back in those days.
Oh, yes, a general store. Well, about like any other country store, you know, they had a little hardware and they had groceries of various kinds and bought produce from the farm women and things like that.
One thing the library is interested in learning is something about various customs of the time. What about funeral customs? Were they a little different then?
Well, not as elaborate as they are now. There's more rest of people taking care of the neighbors, you know, dug the graves and all that stuff.
Well, the neighbors came in and dug the graves.
They would dig the graves, generally speaking, and go to all the trouble of taking care of the corpse and burying them and stuff like that.
I've heard some older people say that when a corpse was at a person's home, they'd sit up all night with them. Was
They
that
did.
right?
They always sit up all night with the corpse until it was buried. They never left it until it was put away. Generally the next day after death.
All right, what phase of life do you recall as changing the most, in your opinion?
Why would that be a hard question I'd never thought about it exactly in that way. But
would it be, say, the entertainment? Now, we still eat, I guess, about like we always did.
yes, we do, but I couldn't describe them things to anybody's satisfaction, probably. Maybe I might describe one way and somebody else another.
Was there a movie in Benton when you were a boy?
No, there weren't. No movie. Not in Benton. In fact, there wasn't much motion pictures when I was growing up in the early days. They didn't have the motion pictures. They had some kind of a sleight of hand shows and things that travel around through the country and show at school buildings. And
What about a Victrola? Did you have one of those?
well, not till quite a long time later than when they first come out. I remember the Victrola, though, the old Thomas A. Edison that had a cylinder.
Cylinder instead of a flat disc.
Instead of the disc, yes, that's right.
When did you get your first radio?
Oh, I don't know that. It's after I went to Detroit.
So you didn't
After
have one
26.
back. Yeah.
No, who else?
All right, anything else you'd like to say, Uncle Ed?
Well, I wouldn't know what to say. Whatever you want to ask me, I'll answer the best I can.
Well, I've just about run out of questions, and I
Well,
thought maybe you had a statement you'd like to
well,
make.
Well, I will. I'm going to be 98 years old pretty soon, the 26th of this month, and I'm thankful to God that I'm as well as I am, can get about as well as I can, and for all my many friends. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ed Bloomingberg, born in Kentucky. He's back here on a visit now and soon to go back to Michigan again. But if he lives 5 more days, he'll be 98 years old. This is Ray Mofield speaking, recording for the Marshall County Library.